Hello, I'm Dracattack, and this is Plus Profile number 36. Today we have Nuein. He contacted me through my post over on the official forums. He's an old EverQuest player. He also played a little Vanguard Saga of Heroes, and of course also a little WoW. So I can't wait to learn a little bit more about him. Onward and upward.
So my character will be probably the same character name that I've used now since September of 1999 when I first started playing EQ, which is the phonetic is Nuein, just like Nuein. Sometimes it has an X on there just because that's my original paladin had when he got moved over to another server. And I will probably be playing an Archai warrior just to do something a little. Yeah, as far as the combination, I really don't think that's going to be a hugely popular combo, especially since they're supposed to be starting out near the Dwarven Warriors, which is going to be one of the more kind of traditional combinations we see. So I imagine there's going to be a lot more going that route. I kind of put them in the same realm, at least my thought process wise, is if you go back to like original EQ when it first came out, tons of people loved the look of the Wood Elf Warrior. They hated the stats of the Wood Elf Warrior. Because usually by level 20, 25, and you started picking up some bandit armor and some stuff like that, like your warrior couldn't move. Just from the sheer, because they didn't have very much strength comparatively. They didn't have the stamina, so they didn't have the hit points and stuff like that. So kind of where I see it going, I'm just kind of placing my eggs in the long-term basket of that probably eventually not being such a big deal. About 6 years ago, I had been taking an extended break from MMOs and was starting to get back into them. And at the time, I didn't want to go back to WoW or EverQuest or something like that I played for a long period of time. I actually was looking to get back into Vanguard. I played Vanguard during the beta and a little bit when it first went live, and was like, oh, well, I'll jump into Vanguard. That sounds like something interesting. And of course, as my luck would have it, Vanguard was literally sunset 1 week prior to me deciding to look into getting back into it. But so in looking, in that, of course, everything that started popping up was, Brad McQuaid, EQ, Vanguard, and here's his new game, Pantheon, and started looking at it. And the thing that I liked about it immediately was that Vanguard looked way more like the real successor to EverQuest, as opposed to kind of like EQ2 is fun, but it's not really a follow-up to EverQuest in terms of the way it plays. So I've been following it since then. Right now, no, I don't. Just because I'm kind of waiting to see how the game itself shakes out. I think it's going to be hard because I've played in, since 1999, I've played like every major MMO that's come out. The guild makeups of each game seem to be a little different based on kind of how they are. Like the game I'm playing right now, Final Fantasy XIV, it seems like the guilds are a lot more kind of loose as opposed to like a hardcore raiding game like EverQuest or like Vanguard was back when it was running, or even WoW. So I'm hoping to be kind of one of those guilds pushing in-game content early on. It's just a matter of figuring out who that's going to be on whatever server I end up with. So obviously it's going to be EverQuest. I played it for about 10 years and then took a break and then played it for about the last year and a half-ish before walking away from it again recently to kind of switch things up. The big thing that I like about EverQuest, as opposed to all of the other games I've played long-term, is that EverQuest really felt like everybody had a purpose. And I think, if people, I know that we all kind of like to look at our class or our race or whatever we're playing the game and say like, oh, this is the best class, best race, whatever. But I think if you really sit back and objectively look at the classes in EverQuest, and this is kind of my nerd out moment on it, if you look at them and you be totally honest about everything, not just looking at, because you can't look at a certain scenario. You can't look at, okay, well, who's the best tank? and limit it just to, say, raids. Because in EverQuest, that's going to be a very simple answer. It's going to be warriors every day of the week. With kind of, well, I shouldn't even say that. It's going to be like 80% warrior, 15% Shadow Knight, and 5% paladin. But when you look at it overall, you can't really say that warriors are better than paladins or that Shadow Knights are better than paladins or any of that sort of stuff. They each have very distinct pluses and minuses to them. And one of the things that I think EverQuest did better than any other game I've played since is when it came time to raiding, they were able to actually make raids feel like people had a purpose for their character. You know, there were raids where you weren't going to succeed if you didn't have an enchanter. There were raids where, you know, we were specifically stun locking things with paladins or using Shadow Knights to kite things because they could maintain aggro while running without having to stop or really take any damage. You know, and you had that for, I think at the end it was like 15 classes or whatever it was. Every class had what it could do and what it brought to the table. And that was one of the things that I liked, as opposed to, you know, looking at a game like WoW, where you can play a paladin and you can pick, are you DPS, are you a healer, or are you a tank? And you're viable at all three of those. I like having that kind of differentiation because you end up with people who are really, really good at their classes, who really know the game, and you get into a lot more a high-level thinking and theory crafting about raiding. One of the things I like about MMOs is that, particularly MMORPGs, is that you're not really locked into how you're going to play stuff. So I think anybody who's played them for any amount of time would have a hard time really picking a single story. I could very easily go with the time that I lost 12 levels overnight because I passed out at raid drunk. But probably the thing that really got me hooked on EverQuest of all things was actually two different occurrences. The first time was actually losing my corpse. Back in old school EverQuest, when you died, you had 3 hours to get back to your corpse and loot it, or all your stuff just vanished. Good luck trying to get it back. Thankfully, it was very early on in the game, so I didn't lose anything really of value. I think it was probably maybe a week into playing. I was playing a high elf paladin, fought my way up to level 15-ish or so, and took a boat over to another continent. And it took me all of about 2.5 hours to get to where I was in East Common Lands, and died to a dark elf rogue named Kisden Gix, who kind of just annihilated me with 1 or 2 hits. The problem was that I was extremely new to the game and didn't know about things like Bind Affinity, so I got sent back to Fadewar and had to spend another 2.5 hours and then see if I could get somebody to help me get my corpse before I lost everything. And I think I got everything back with probably about 30 or 45 seconds to spare. And just see that level of like actual feeling like it was an actual adventure. There was some actual, you know, like purpose driven there to move. That, and then if you'll permit me, a second one was actually so I had originally started on the Burtok server and found out that 2 of my real life friends that I was actually really good friends with in college and hanging out with them on a daily basis, I didn't know they played EverQuest, and I transferred over to their server. And I had a very different mindset about how to play the game than one of my friends, Joe, who was an Altoholic. But his whole thing was all about actual role playing and trying to accomplish things that he theoretically shouldn't have been able to. I was very much into raiding, pushing in-game content, and working my way up. So I'm a competitive person. I like to, you know, when they think, you know, okay, I need to know about paladins. Who do I need to talk to? Well, I need to talk to this guy. That's who I want to be. And he kept trying to goad me into duels. And I'm not a big PvPer, but I remember telling him, like, Joe, there's no way you could possibly beat me. I don't know why you're wasting my time. And finally he bet me dinner, which as a broke college student, a $7 sub sandwich and 1 liter of soda was very valuable to me. So I was like, fine, I'm going to take your money and this is going to be worth it. And as it turned out, I lost. And the reason why I lost was because he was so into the lore and the role playing and everything about it that he would go searching out these really tiny quests and things like this that most of us ignored. And his goal, because he would set these really weird goals, was he wanted to see how far he could take a troll Shadow Knight through the Paladin Epic Weapon quest. And when he told us all this, we all laughed at him. Until the night he decided to duel me in front of about 20 or 30 of our in-game friends, and he beat me because I could not kill him because I was a paladin. And the reason I couldn't kill him was he had managed to get the first sword in that quest. And that sword had 10 charges of complete heal on it. And for the life of me, literally he just rope-a-doped me to the point that I had no mana, I couldn't heal myself. And then I lost to somebody who was 15 levels below me, and his gear quality, to use the eye level that everybody's familiar with from like WoW. Like if my eye level was like a 300, his was like a 200. And he could barely hit me, but he could hit me enough that I couldn't regen. And I couldn't get mana, and I couldn't do anything. And I just had to sit there and take it. And what was great or terrible about it was that while all of our friends in game were sitting there heckling me in the chat box, the chat window, because we had no voice chat, what they didn't know is that I was sitting in a house with Joe, and he was about 10 feet behind me, howling, laughing the entire time because I just had to stand there and take it because he knew I wasn't going to just leave the zone and flee and be called a coward and all that stuff that EverQuest does. But between those two things, getting to, that's what got me into the whole idea of what an MMORPG is all about. Playing it how you want to play it. Do you want to be the explorer? Do you want to be the guy who's really destroying the demons and whatnot, or are you just the guy who wants to go and find every nook and cranny and do everything that everybody says you can't do? I'm sure that all my friends who play WoW and every other game are probably going to hate this answer, but I'm going to say every single boss in EverQuest until you've beaten it the first time. And the reason for that is that every game I've ever played, like I said, I've played every major MMO that's come out since 2000, 1999, and always trying to push the end game for tanking. And one of the things that I've seen is a lot of games do really interesting things where you kind of have to be on your toes. I think one of the previous profiles, Redbeard Gaming, he had mentioned like the performer in DODH, where everybody's got to be on their toes. But the reason why EverQuest did something really interesting where it's not just take 20 people and you have to convince 20 people to avoid AE damage, like say WoW. What they did instead was, okay, you're going to take maximum 54 people, but in the early days, I can remember raiding stuff with 300 people to the point where none of us could move. And taking that number of people, whether it's 10 people, 20 people, or 200 people, and not only do you all have to avoid the AE damage, do whatever stupid little, jump through whatever little hoops the boss wants you to, but you also have to have an intimate knowledge of what your class does and how my class affects your class, affects the next guy's class. And until you actually experience it, because you can watch all the strategies, but trying to actually integrate what you see like on a YouTube video and then going back and actually playing it and knowing how all that stuff is going to work together, even stuff that's relatively simple can actually be a little difficult. And that was one of the things I really liked about it, was the fact of you can't just be good at gaming. You can't just be good at reading. You have to be good at being a paladin. You have to be good at playing a cleric, a druid, whatever it is you chose to play. I'm going to say I like PvE better. And the main reason why, I don't care how much I get heckled, is because my ex-wife is significantly better at PvP than I am. I kind of bounce back and forth between the two. I would say I'm like 75% main for life. 20% does the guild need me to do something else, and then like 5% altoholic. I go through these periods where I really get the idea of like, oh, I saw Drac playing that Necro, and that Necro was awesome. I'm going to go make a Necro. And then I do that, and I power level it to whatever level I need to get it to, and then it's like, but you know what? I'm just going to go play the Shadow Knight, and I go back to whatever my main is. And then aside from that, like I said, I take a lot of pride in being not only well known on the server in terms of being like the guy to go to, but I just like to be. I want to know everything there is to know about my class, and I mean everything going down from like cooldowns, what are your rotations, all that sort of stuff, but also I'm playing a paladin, and I've got a ranger, a rogue, a berserker, a druid, and a shaman in my group. So what is my actual role here? That's going to be different from if I'm playing a paladin, but I've got a ranger, a monk, a cleric, and a mage. It's going to change in and out of those things. So I want to know all those nooks and crannies first, and then if I'm really bored, then I might make an alt. But it's probably going to fall to the wayside pretty quick. It really depends on the game and the value of the crafting. I will be the first one to say that I absolutely despise trade skilling. I know some people love it. I just can't do it. Now, if it's something where there's like a tangible benefit to me throughout the game, then sure, I'll go ahead and try and keep up with it and try and use it to the best of my advantage. But 9 times out of 10, it's been because my game of choice was EverQuest. And like if you jump into EverQuest right now, and if you're on anything other than one of their progression servers that's just starting out, then blacksmithing is like useless to you until like 7 expansions in. Then it becomes moderately useful. And even then, it's only kind of useful if you're like an in-game raider and you've got like all of the cultural odds from raiding. So it's not really my thing, but I'll do it if I have to, or like I said, if it's actually valuable, then sure, I'll go ahead and jump in. I'm not 19 anymore, so now it's Diet Coke, maybe coffee, maybe a beer, nothing too heavy. I'm going to say that everybody who has done one of these interviews with you has been wrong. I'm just going to state that category. The chair trumps all. I don't care how great your processor or your GPU, your CPU, none of that stuff. I don't care how great any of that stuff is. If your chair sucks, you're not gaming for very long. I don't have any at this time. I've kind of debated the idea of maybe starting to stream when Pantheon first launches, just because I think Pantheon's going to be interesting when it launches. It's going to be a very, very different game than what a lot of current MMO players are kind of used to. Guys who are my age and their first games were like Ultima Online, Asheron's Call, EverQuest, Dark Age of Camelot, stuff like that. They're kind of used to the way that things like particularly tanking, how that works. I will tell you, like I said, I've been playing Final Fantasy XIV recently, and it kind of drives me nuts to see those where like you go to a dungeon and the whole goal is to run from the start of the dungeon to the first boss as fast as the group can, and who cares what mobs are in the way, and you're just going to AE tank everything and AE DPS everything down, go fight the boss, and then repeat that process before each boss. And I think Pantheon's going to be, at least from what I've seen in the streams, it looks like it's going to be a bit more of a return to how EverQuest was. Really kind of managing aggro, managing singles, twos, threes at most, that sort of thing. So given kind of my predisposition to wanting to be kind of a source of knowledge, I think I may start streaming if that seems like it'll be something that'll help anybody out. No, I'm just really looking forward to finally getting a new game to actually explore. It's going to be a little bit different. So like I said, I think, at least in my opinion, this is the real EverQuest 2. So what I'm going to call, and I'll give my reasoning here, we've started to see more pre-alphas happening over the last 2 years. I would not be surprised to see like an Alpha 1 towards the end of this year, Alpha 2 beginning of next year. So I'm going to call March 2023, 25 years after the launch of the original EverQuest.
Hate, rage, don't waste it on me.